Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, aspiring author Jonathan Taylor. As I promised on my Twitter profile, link to that in the description below, throughout all of July I'll be doing how to write videos. And I'm gonna start this theme of sorts with a video on fictional technologies. How to best write about them, or how to best use them within the context of your story. And also most effectively, so you at least look like you know what you're talking about. As always, I'll try to keep my advice somewhat vague or somewhat broad, just so it can be applied to as many genres as possible. Before I get into the actual meat of the video, I first want to clarify certain misconceptions that spring up around the idea of technological development. Number one, a rich country is not automatically more technologically advanced, especially when compared to other countries that are at similar levels of richness. Just because a country has a lot of money it can spend towards something doesn't mean it will always spend that money towards that something. While it is true that richer countries tend to have more advanced levels of technology, that's correlation rather than causation. If anything, having more advanced technology allows you to extract more value from your environment. Meaning that if there is a causation, it's not that wealth creates technology; it's that technology creates wealth. Moving further along, the second misconception is that. Second thing I want to clarify is that no singular innovator or inventor will ever single-handedly make their inventions mainstream. The point where innovation becomes mainstream requires a lot of work when it comes to building an infrastructure that really makes its use possible, and that kind of effort cannot be done single-handedly by a single person. It takes a lot of dedicated effort from a lot of qualified people to implement it. For reasons I hope this video will clarify. And finally, number 3. Technology and technological development doesn't just progress in one particular way. It might seem that way to might seem that way to us because a cursory look throughout history will reveal that this leads to this, which leads to that. But actually, if you look at all of these single lead-ins, you'll find that all of them have a great deal of divergence, among them. And the reasons these points of divergence failed isn't always due to the quality of the actual products that were developed and that formed these divergences. They could as well be factors. There could as well be other environmental factors that led to one particular innovation, winning out over all the others. And these environmental factors can change from setting to setting. This is not an all roads lead to Rome kind of situations. Technological divergence is not a bug, it's a feature. With that out of the way, let's start with a simple question. How do you talk about fictional technologies? Well, one of the easiest or most accessible ways of doing so is to make the distinction between hard science fiction and soft science fiction. In order to explain the difference, let's take the example of a teleportation device. With soft science fiction, it's enough to just say it exists and it can bring you from one point to another within your setting. That's it, that's all you need to know. You could try to explain it, and there's plenty to explain that even with just this device. And the more you explain it, the harder your sci-fi gets. Possible things that would require an explanation when it comes to a teleportation device would be, well, what powers it? Where does it draw its power from? What kind of physical principle does it use to actually teleport you somewhere else? And can it teleport you anywhere else, or only within a given network? if it can only teleport you within a given network? Does the network itself require some kind of work, some kind of maintenance? If it can teleport you anywhere, how does it know where to teleport you? How do you control where it is that you end up? Um, does it have a range limit, and so on and so forth? These are these are things you have to think about when you think about the distinction between hard science fiction and soft science fiction. But even outside of science fiction, and even outside of this dichotomy, you should still know what your invention or what your device actually does. But not necessarily in as much depth, but at least on a surface level. You don't have to just like how you don't have to know how a combustion works at a molecular level in order to explain how a car engine works. You only need to explain really only some basic functioning principles of whatever technology you mention in your stories in order to emphasize it, to make it more believable, more immersive, so to speak. But really, this distinction and this point really only refers to the last part of the story from my perspective, where the device already exists and already has a purpose and an environment built around itself. I wanted to go more into how such devices are created, and in order to do so, I want to address 4 distinct questions that emerge around such a device, or around innovations in general. Number 1, why? What does this innovation allow the people in your setting to do? Well, what does it accomplish? What makes it necessary for your world or for your characters, etc. This isn't really the easiest question to answer. Look at your setting and try to figure out what most people in that setting would want, or either most people or most powerful among them. Figure out what they want and what they could spend some kind of money or some other token of effort to get it, if they could, because they perceive that it has a value to them. Second question I want to ask is how. What kind of principle does it use in order to accomplish its function? What makes it work and what makes it effective? Now that you've established the purpose of this device, and 9 times out of 10 will be to fulfill a certain need, you will now have to ask yourself how it is that need will be fulfilled. What kind of a functioning principle does the device use in order to fulfill the need you've identified? Is it mechanical? Is it electrical? Is it hydraulic? Is it pneumatic? Is it magnetic? Is it atomic or nuclear? Is it chemical? Is it something different altogether? All of these functioning principles have their different strengths and drawbacks, making their effectiveness very situation and function dependent. So you'll have to do a bit of research to really figure out what makes it work best. Also of note will be stuff like whether or not the device requires some kind of fuel, some kind of power source, or if it needs any kind of maintenance. What kind of maintenance does it require, and how do you schedule it, something like that. The third question that you should consider is who. What distinguishes the way the inventor thinks and solves problems? What aspects of the way they solve problems is reflected in the way they conceive of their invention? Like I said, the important thing here is that you identify a need, something most people have. because most people, to some extent, realize that there is a need within society, it is possible that these different people will come up with different ways to address that need. And because these people are different, they will come up with different results. Then these different results might to some extent be tied to their educational background, their work experience, or their own particular brand of problem solving. This is where you can go. This is where you can go a bit more in depth about who the inventors actually are, if you're in any way interested in that. And you can also look into the societal pressures that have been placed upon them, if you're interested, and maybe look at how those influence the way they try to make their invention more mainstream. Speaking of, number 4, where. What kinds of pressures on the device come from its environment? What kind of adaptations does the device take on in order to better suit the environment it's being brought into? The simplest way to approach this question is to look at resources, as in what resources are available and how these resources can be used in order to construct the device, and to what extent does the setting have to change in order to allow for the construction and proliferation of that device or of that particular technology. Think about it in terms of streetcars. If you wanted to take a city that doesn't have streetcars and give it streetcars, you can't just say, okay, here's some vehicles, have fun. No, you have to first lay out tracks all throughout the city. You also have to set up power lines. You have to set up some kind of depot area where the streetcars will sit when they aren't in use, etc., etc. And you might recognize that all of these require you to have a solid electrical infrastructure, require your society to have some idea of electromobility, and it also requires them to have the ability to produce iron tracks at an industrial level. So there is a certain front cost of infrastructure that needs to be met before you can really implement certain technologies. For instance, another way you could take this is you have one invention that was successful in one part of your setting, but it can't break through in this other part of your setting. And ask yourself, why doesn't it break through in this other part of the setting? Is it because the use conditions in this setting are different somehow, too inhospitable for this device? Is it because it's harder to maintain the device in that other setting? I don't know. It's something to consider. Another direction you could take this question in is, what kind of pressures come from society itself, from the social and legal prerequisites that the people there pose. You could think of that. You could think, for example, of patent law, and start to wonder: does your setting even have patent law? And if it does, well, who can file a patent? And also, what does the patent say about how that invention can be used? What kinds of patents are there? Different kinds of patents that have different conditions and tied to either obtaining them or using them? Does violating in some way those patent laws come with certain punishments or certain legal ramifications? Can that patent be renewed? Those kinds of questions. You can alternately look into the lives of the inventors, like you did at the third question, and look more into the social conditions from which they stem. Maybe as part of a rags to riches story. If your inventor is particularly rich or particularly poor, they might face different obstacles when it comes to actually making their invention mainstream. Maybe they have different people they can call upon or rely upon. Maybe they face different levels of acceptance as they try to bring the invention into the limelight. Or maybe they're treated differently after they bring their invention into the limelight. You know, those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things you could really look into if you were so inclined. You don't have to address all of these questions if you want to, mention inventions in your work, but it is helpful to consider them if you are indeed thinking about implementing certain technologies into your world, or describing how these technologies came to be. At the very least, you will at least have an understanding of what the attributes and accomplishments that your society values actually are. And that was my video. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have anything you'd like to add, the comment section awaits your input. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like. And if you want to see when the next video comes out, then please go ahead and subscribe. Maybe also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. Until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.